Hello and welcome. This is Notibot ENG. Good evening. I'm your name, and this is our evening news recap. In a significant development, the U.S. military's involvement in the Iran conflict has been questioned by the Wall Street Journal, with reports suggesting that no strategic goals have been achieved. We'll bring you updates on the latest developments in the Middle East war. Additionally, we'll cover President Trump's meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping and how it's impacting global markets, and a surprising twist in the Iran war's impact on oil supplies. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. military's prolonged involvement in the region appears to have yielded no tangible strategic gains. The U.S. administration's efforts in the ongoing conflict with Iran have yielded some tactical gains, but significant strategic objectives remain unachievable, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal. Citing unnamed sources, the report suggests that major disagreements persist between Washington and Tehran over the future management of the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical waterway that separates Iran from the Middle East's oil-rich Gulf states, and its control is seen as crucial for the global energy supply chain. Diplomatic efforts between the two sides have continued amid rising regional tensions, but negotiations remain stalled over core political and security issues. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has sought to address concerns about Iranian ballistic missile capabilities and the country's nuclear program. However, significant gaps persist regarding the type of restrictions Iran would be willing to accept on its nuclear program. The Journal report notes that these disagreements are a major hurdle in securing a strategic agreement between the two sides. The stalled negotiations have serious implications for regional stability and global security. As tensions continue to escalate, there is growing concern about the potential for miscalculation or conflict. The U.S. and Iran have been engaged in a series of naval skirmishes in the Strait of Hormuz, and the risk of escalation remains high. The international community is watching closely as the situation continues to unfold, with many hoping that a diplomatic breakthrough can be achieved soon. We're shifting gears now to a developing international crisis involving a major tech company, as tensions rise in the wake of a recent announcement. The fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran appears increasingly uncertain after a recent deterioration in talks. According to Donald Trump, the ceasefire is on life support, following rejection of Tehran's latest proposal, which he deemed totally unacceptable. Iran has responded by stating that Washington's demands are unreasonable and warning it is prepared to respond to any new aggression. The tensions come as Israeli strikes in Lebanon continue to escalate. In southern Lebanon, a deadly airstrike killed 6 people amidst ongoing bombardment. Meanwhile, oil prices have risen again amid growing global concerns over the Strait of Hormuz. The region remains a critical choke point for global energy supplies, with tensions between the U.S. and Iran heightening fears of disruption. The Trump administration is reportedly divided on how to proceed with its strategy towards Iran. CNN has reported that some officials within the administration are opposed to continuing to press Tehran's demands. In response to the escalation, the U.S. has announced plans to discuss reopening and securing shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.K. has also expressed support for such efforts. The latest developments in the crisis come as Australia announces fresh sanctions against Iranian officials and entities. Additionally, the U.S. is set to release 53 million barrels from its strategic oil reserve amid supply concerns. These moves are seen as part of a broader effort to manage global energy markets and mitigate the impact of the Hormuz crisis. As tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate, world powers are gathering for a critical meeting that could determine the fate of regional security. Good evening. I'm your name, and this is our news recap. A multinational meeting of defense ministers is underway in Paris, co-chaired by French Defense Minister Catherine Vautrin and her British counterpart John Healey. The virtual gathering brings together dozens of defense ministers from countries affected by the Iran war, with a focus on restoring trade flows through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S.-Iran ceasefire deal has been under strain, with President Donald Trump warning that it's on life support. This comes as tensions between the U.S. and Iran continue to escalate. The recent drone attack on an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman has heightened concerns about maritime security. The meeting aims to discuss military plans to ensure the safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical waterway that connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. The region is home to some of the world's largest oil producers and refineries, making it a vital choke point for global energy supplies. France and the UK are seeking international cooperation to address this challenge. The meeting will also touch on cybersecurity threats posed by Iran to regional shipping interests. Meanwhile, the US has announced new sanctions against several Iranian companies involved in maritime trade. This development is likely to further strain relations between Washington and Tehran. As we wait for updates from Paris, our Live blog will continue to bring you the latest news from this developing crisis. As tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate following Iran's nuclear deal collapse, a significant diplomatic meeting is taking place between two world leaders. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have met in Singapore amidst rising tensions over Iran's military actions in the Middle East. The U.S.-Israeli conflict has led to a significant escalation of hostilities, with Iranian retaliation striking deep into Gulf territories and oil prices spiking above $110 per barrel. The war has fundamentally reset threat perceptions across the Gulf, shredding the previous logic of strategic hedging between Washington and Beijing. For decades, Gulf states assumed that while they traded east, their security ultimately resided with the U.S. fleet. However, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and Iranian strikes on ports, energy terminals, and commercial landmarks in the UAE have demonstrated that this assumption is no longer tenable. The 13 U.S. bases in the region are now either vulnerable or nearly uninhabitable at the peak of the fighting, rendering the security guarantee a strategic liability rather than an asset. China, meanwhile, has emerged as a near-term imperative for Gulf states seeking a principal economic and political partner. The petroyuan has become a viable successor to the petrodollar, with Iran and Russia playing pivotal roles in this new order. This shift is significant because it fundamentally alters the balance of power in the region. As the U.S. appears increasingly unable or unwilling to protect its allies, China is poised to capitalize on this opportunity. This development matters for several reasons. The implications for global energy markets, the rise of alternative currencies, and the potential consequences for regional stability. The future of U.S.-China relations will also be closely tied to the success of Chinese efforts to establish itself as a dominant economic and political force in the Gulf region. Facing a severe oil shortage, Japan's snack food industry is being forced to adapt with some unexpected changes in the packaging of its beloved treats. Calbee, Japan's largest snack maker, has been forced to switch its brightly colored packaging to black and white due to an ink ingredient shortage caused by the Iran war. The company, which produces popular brands such as Calbee potato chips, will be replacing 14 of its products with monochrome branding by the end of May. The move is attributed to disrupted supplies of naphtha, a petroleum-based oil derivative used in printing ink, which Japan relies on for about 40% of its consumption. The country's imports from the Middle East have slowed significantly due to the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which has caused shortages and increased costs. Calbee's decision was made as the company sought to minimize the impact of rising costs and material shortages. In a statement, the company explained that it was reacting to an unstable supply of certain raw materials and would be switching to black and white packaging for some of its flagship products. The government has assured the public that adequate supplies of naphtha ink ingredient have been secured for important functions in Japan. Kei Sato, a senior government spokesperson, stated that domestic naphtha refining continued with the use of stockpiled crude oil, and imports from outside the Middle East have tripled in May compared to levels before the Iran war broke out. The Iranian war has highlighted the vulnerability of Japan's supply chain due to its reliance on imported materials. The country's government is working with major corporations, including Calbee, to ensure that naphtha is imported through alternative routes. That's all for today's news recap. I'm your name, and we'll be back with more updates tomorrow. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to stay up to date on the latest global news, please consider subscribing to our channel. We'll bring you in-depth analysis and breaking news as it happens. Until next time, good night and goodbye.